Welcome to the 3i Podcast. I'm Mike Launchman, and with me today is Dr. Sandra Wood. Sandra has 20 years of experience in education and recently became the superintendent of Porte Community School Corporation. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you for having me.
It's always a treat to have superintendents in here. We get to kind of talk to them about what they're doing, what's going on. You started your teaching career, I think, South Central?
Mm-hmm. South Central Junior Senior High School. So I was a Spanish teacher, the only Spanish teacher in that building because it's a small school. So yeah. I was the entire department. So that was my first gig, and did that for 7 years teaching.
And then left teaching and went into
so my first little taste of leadership was actually as the president of the Teachers Association. And I really started exploring getting my admin license because I thought I wanted to teach at the university level. And I had gotten some advice at the time that, if you're going to aspire to be a college professor, you really have to be an administrator to sort of build credibility and understand school functioning and things like that. So I thought, okay, well, this is probably a hoop that I'm going to have to jump through.
Okay.
So I went to get my administrator's license and started those classes. And to my surprise, I really liked them. And started really enjoying what I was learning and some of the experiences I started to have. As things progressed, it started kind of feeling like maybe this is a good fit for me. So
you transitioned from...
So initially my first position was at the same school where I was teacher. So everything just kind of lined up for me that the principal was retiring the same year that I finished my license. So kind of threw my name in the hat, and I was lucky enough that interviewed and they selected me for that position. So I moved from teacher in that building to the principal, which brought its challenges because, you have relationships with your colleagues and things like that. So kind of shifted the dynamic, but overall, I think it was a smooth transition. And so I was principal there for 6 years. And then in that time, I had the opportunity to participate in the IPLI. So I was the second cohort of IPLI when they brought that program back. That's where I met Dr. McDaniel. And through Indiana State, you could get the credits to go along with the courses. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to do that, let's just take this all the way. I signed up. Once I finished the EDS, then position opened up at MSD of New Durham Township. Going from principal to right into a superintendent role is a big leap, but didn't feel that much at the time just because I was very familiar, having seen a lot of what the superintendent at South Central did. So I did that role for 6 years.
That's great. Yeah, I have so much to break down there. You gave me a lot to work with here. You talked about going from being a teacher in a building to being a brand new principal. Can you share with us a little bit about maybe some of the initial struggles that you might have had in that?
Yeah, obviously, at the very beginning, there had to be some relationships had to be reworked because, there were people that would come in and speak very frankly in a way that they were used to being able to talk to me or complaining about something, and had to kind of work with that and help them understand that, are you talking to me right now because you're venting and that's the way you're used to approaching things with me, or are you asking me to take action in this regard? And then, just kind of putting it straightforward like that and allowing the person to kind of realize, oh, okay, she's in a different role now and I have to be careful the things that I'm saying and that kind of thing. But I've always taken it very seriously to try to always remember what it's like to be a teacher. And that has helped with some of, the transition points, and especially that first transition being in the same district, is that, I always tried to take things from the perspective of how is this going to feel to the teachers when this rolls out, or what concerns are teachers going to have with this? What I try to think about is we are all on the same team. So that's one of the things that sometimes frustrates me with the association. I would say perception, because I don't think it's the reality, is that it's like an us versus them situation.
Right.
Because I don't see it that way and I don't approach it that way. To me, they're advocating for the profession of teaching, which is what I do too.
Right.
So we all have the same goal here. We all have, a common theme that we're working toward. There's different obstacles, I think, in our way that sometimes aren't always understood. But at the end of the day, I think that we have to always remember, we're all here for the same reason. I would love to be able to hand out raises to teachers every year that support them in what they deserve professionally, but our hands are tied by things that come from the state and other factors like enrollment that we have to navigate through. And I think we're all working toward the same goal. It just is a challenge sometimes to get everybody on the same page.
No, I agree. I know that everybody that goes into education goes with the mindset of, I want to do what's right for kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when associations and administration use that as their focal point, you create a scenario where you're looking for win-win solutions for everybody.
Absolutely.
I also noticed that you talked about IPLIs, and you were in cohort 2.
Yes.
So I was actually one of the people that developed IPLI.
Okay.
You might not remember this, but I actually ran your culture data for you when you were principal. I actually worked with them to help set up Marzano and his team to come in and did that. So I actually was part of doing that with Dr. Gruner, Dr. Bess, and a few others. We had those kind of conversations. I ran the stats behind the culture stuff. So
now that you mentioned that, I do remember that, but I had forgotten.
Yeah, we have that. And then the other way that you and I have crossed paths is, unfortunately for you, you had me teach you a class in Warsaw. So, and I know I'm a different professor than most. So I try to make everything practical.
That's what I really enjoyed about Indiana State's program as a whole, was that I thought that every component of it was practical because we were all working at the time, and so it was very relevant to what we were doing, and the things that were asked for the most part were things we could actually turn around and use.
How have you been able to take that network that you developed in your Ph.D. cohort, and how's that made you a better leader in your roles you've taken since?
Well, it's kind of neat because we all started out in that program in different positions than a lot of us are in now. And so that's kind of been interesting to see the different individuals that went on different paths moving forward, and how, some of what we recognize just as classmates in each other kind of came to fruition as they move forward in their career paths. Like Brandon Penrod was in my cohort, and obviously he was the one that everybody looked for help with stats and all of that. And now, of course, he's got a lot of credibility in the financial side of things. So, and that's how you learn best, right? Like learning from each other and being able to put some kind of hands-on application of something is how you remember things.
I loved it because not only is it you build networks, but you also build the opportunity to have different resource providers.
Yes.
So you coming from a small school, well, you had other people that were in Warsaw District, let's say. And so when you said, hey, I need something on this, instead of you saying, oh, I got to develop something, now I might be able to say, hey, Warsaw, or hey, so-and-so. Do you have anything that you might be able to send me that you use for this that resonate with you? Because it did with me.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Definitely. And especially now as I've transitioned, from a smaller district to a larger district. And so having the ability to call somebody up and say, like, is it normal that this is structured this way?
Right.
And so being able to just know people who know, the different sectors of public education is helpful.
So I think one of the two lessons that I'm hearing that we could share with the audience is basically when you get into a PhD program or a higher ed program and you're working on that, it's not just what you read. It's more about how you take those readings and are able to apply it to impact your day-to-day. And then number two, it's the network that you build, because those resources and relationships are going to be the most valuable currency that you'll have in the profession.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that, it just applies to so many different things that, while you're in that program, you can't anticipate what your path is going to be. But building that network is something that you can take with you, no matter what your next position is or where you land after, you finalize your degree or move to that next step.
I'm really curious to kind of learn a little bit more about your first superintendency and what were the two or three biggest challenges that you went from being a building principal in a small rural to now a superintendent in a small rural?
So I think the biggest thing right off the bat was the financial side and the budget. Because you come into a new superintendent position, in most cases, those contracts run July 1 to June 30th. Yeah. So you come in July, and it is literally get in here, and now it's time to do the budget. And And being in a small district, I didn't have anyone to do that. I was very upfront when I interviewed for the position that I knew a little bit about school finance and budgeting, but not a lot, and that I would need to learn. And I was committed to doing that after that first round, and just, sort of got through it, relying on the state organizations to help with some of those things. Because when you don't have a person for all of those things, the organizations that are out there have those resources and can kind of help you to align with who you need to have, or the training that you need to go to. So it was through IASBO that I attended, it was 4 weeks of sessions just to have some understanding of how the budget works, and got myself, after 6 years, to the point where I was doing the budget and
By yourself.
By myself. Through time, though, after a few years, and once I felt I had an understanding, I actually started to enjoy it. So It was one of those things. It's like a puzzle. It's like a puzzle that you put together and have to figure out with your budget and limited funds that you have, and how you can rearrange things and put things together. So it ended up being something that I actually enjoyed doing.
I don't care what they say. There's some great professors that do a great job in teaching school finance at the university level, but until you have to build your own budget, it ain't the same thing.
It's not. You can have an understanding of how school finance works, which I think is kind of what you get out of that preparation program, but that is not the same as putting a budget together and understanding, when you have actual numbers in front of you, where they came from, what they mean, and the attention to detail that has to go in with a process like that was also something that was a surprise to me. That first round, I put a date in incorrectly into Gateway, and didn't think that it was a big deal. I did not understand the implications of the date going into that website, meaning that this was information that needed to be out there for the public to be able to participate in a hearing. Didn't realize that was so important. And then we ended up changing the date, and I didn't update it in the system. And they sent it back to me and told me that our entire budget wasn't going to be improved, and we were going to revert to the previous year funding, which was
substantial.
Very, extremely substantial, and would have been detrimental. We would have lost a lot of money that we had been counting on. And so there again, your networking comes into play, where I had gotten on the phone with someone who connected me with somebody else who had gone through something similar, and told me who the person was that I needed to call down at the state level, and made that phone call, and had some sleepless nights through that, but we got it rectified and figured out. But it just, sometimes you have to make those mistakes to know how serious some of the minor details can be.
So I think it's a fair statement for us to say school boards, especially rural school boards, who sometimes are very fiscally conservative, and they don't understand why you would hire a consultant to help you with the budget. Take 2 years. Allow them to hire a consultant. Allow them to have someone who specializes in that, because the cost of not doing so can dramatically impact you.
It can be huge.
Yeah.
And something as minor as a date like that you just don't think twice about something. Does it seem like a big deal? At the end of the day, the guidelines for finance are very black and white, and there's not a lot of room for error. So yeah, sometimes those consulting opportunities are well worth the investment.
Most superintendents come on board and they get a 3-year contract. So my recommendation for school boards has always been, year 1, hire a consultant, have them help them intensely. Year 2, make sure it's a strong collaborative where the soup's taking the lead, but they feel the support. And then year 3, they're just checking over things, crossing T's, dotting I's, doing different things like that.
Yeah.
What I would piggyback, though, is that doesn't mean that your network went away. That doesn't mean that fellow superintendents in small roles can't go, look over mine, I'll look over yours, see if you miss anything. Because I am a firm believer that not one single financial budget should ever go through with just the superintendent's eyes.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. For budget or anything else, just even having the opportunity to call somebody up and say, I'm thinking of this, but I'm not sure if I'm thinking of everything.
Right.
Help me to talk this through, because I can't talk to anyone else about this, and I just need to have someone to bounce it off of.
Yeah, it's very rare that your board president understands it.
Right.
Or your,
right.
Or even like in a small rural, like treasurers have not had that experience.
Exactly.
They do the day-to-day. They don't do the long-term planning that you're required to do.
Exactly.
Well, I find that interesting because, like, for me, the hardest part was when I went from building level to central office as an assistant soup. It was having to understand the bigger picture of a district rather than just my building. So when I was building leader or something, I was focused on what's best for my building.
Yeah.
Now I have to go back and go, okay, what's best for our district as a whole? That was probably my number one obstacle when I transitioned. But my number two was the politics. I'm not very good at keeping my mouth shut, as you and I know. So I'm just kind of curious, what were the differences you felt in the politics behind that job?
So I think that's one of the advantages of having been in a small district is that I was exposed to a lot of that as a principal, just because I was part of a lot of the conversations that the superintendent just brought us into as the two principals that were in the building. We were brought into those conversations. It's almost been more of a surprise seeing the difference between the small district to the large district than moving roles from principal to superintendent.
That's fair. So let's talk a little bit about that transition period, because you're still in that honeymoon period. You're still in your first year, and we were under 1,000 kids at Westville, right? What's LaPorte's current enrollment ballpark?
We're about 5,630.
Okay, so you almost 6X.
Yes.
And the number of schools, you were all one campus.
All one campus.
In Westville. Now you were
10 buildings.
Yeah, that's a slight change. So let's talk first about the politics. What are you seeing in the politics of running a larger district?
I think the biggest thing that, has really stood out to me is just the role of the school within the city of LaPorte is so important. So the things that we're doing and we're deciding affect the city government and affect the organizations and the industry in LaPorte.
Chamber of Commerce.
Yes. And so there's just so much more connection and involvement from the community, and the number of, different individuals that want to meet with me and talk to me about different things and how can the school be involved in this, or how can the organization help the school. There's just so much more of that. It's a good thing. It's an excellent thing, but it's just been different.
No, it is. I mean, the amount of community partnerships you're able to form in LaPorte versus Westville's got to be dramatically different. But with that comes also the expectations that community has on your role and your leadership and what you have.
Yeah.
How's that been different?
There's a lot more eyes on a school like LaPorte than there would be in a small district. So, that's kind of been an interesting thing, and realizing, that some of the things that are talked about in our board meetings turn into newspaper articles after the fact. And so when there are so many eyes on the school and so many expectations of what the school should be for the community, you don't want to let that expectation down. But at the same time, our resources are dwindling every year. Right. So we're, kind of being expected to do more with less, and that has to be figured out.
What are some of the leadership skills that you have leveraged to help you in your transition?
I came into this position, sort of saying and committing that I'm going to be out, I'm going to be present. I am not going to sit at my desk in central office and sit behind my computer and run the district in that way.
Yeah.
I'm working really hard to do that, but it is hard to get exposure to 10 different buildings on a daily basis when you've also have all these things that are happening. But that's the big emphasis that I've tried to have, is that I want to be transparent. I want to be open. I want to be out there.
Yeah. What are some things that you are very proud that LaPorte has done?
I think that we are taking really good steps toward career and technical education. There is kind of a push, and this was a combined effort with the city of LaPorte to really embrace some of the industry partners that are right there in LaPorte and say, why don't we reach out to the actual industry that we have here in LaPorte that could work in conjunction with our students, and provide programming that could allow students to have some opportunity for certification, do some internships, be familiar with actual places in LaPorte where they could work one day, and then have opportunity potentially to even have an interview before they've graduated. We offer a lot of different things for different kids. performing arts. We in the past decade have built a brand new performing arts center, and have an extremely successful band program and choral program. The number of dual credits that we offer at the high school, the list, I couldn't believe how long it was, you know. So just all of the different diverse programming that we're able to put together for kids. I think the challenge for me is all of those things have already been in place and we've been doing those for years, but we've not been good about talking about it. We've not been good about bragging about ourselves. And in this day and age, you have to be.
I agree. In my 5 Avatars book, I talk about being a transparent storyteller. I think it's twofold. It's one, to show value on the hard work that's gone in your district. But 2, when you let everyone know what you're doing, you get more opportunities to form stronger partnerships.
Absolutely.
And those community partners at LaPorte that you're talking about, that you're forming, their conversation is, how do I help support you so that you give me the talent that I can acquire to make my business better?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all connected. And that's another thing, that we're having conversation about now is we're working toward a goal of potentially putting together an early childhood center for our district, where we've got preschool programs at our different elementary schools now, but bringing all of that together into a centralized location to be able to provide some type of apprenticeship or training for our students who want to work with kids, to be able to do an internship at our preschool that's right here in the district. And then we're growing our own teachers. So, we have the issue, of course, as everyone does, of finding quality teachers in the era of teacher shortages. This is always a problem that we have. So let's start growing our own. Right. This is a field that could be very beneficial to a lot of our kids, but we're not doing anything to support that growth right within our community. So if we can build some type of program or some type of pathway for these kids to be able to graduate with potential training or license that they could get, then we have greater opportunity then to bring them back and teach for us.
I've had conversations with a number of people, and we talk about teacher shortages and we talk about the lack of candidates. I was on earlier today with a dean of the College of Education at a university, and we were talking. He said, my biggest problem is just getting the numbers of people here.
Yeah.
Like, we support them, we retain them, we make sure they have the resources, we do a good job preparing them, but I can't help it that I have 50% less students than I did 10 years ago. The field has changed, the demands have changed.
Definitely.
I appreciate you being proactive in your approach to trying to grow your own. So you're saying, not only am I going to help our community partners with their talent acquisition, I'm going to make sure I help myself.
Sure. Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we want people to stay in LaPorte, because whatever their pathway is, they stay in LaPorte, they're going to buy a home in LaPorte, they're going to have babies of their own, and then they're going to come to our school. So, it's a cycle, and we have to continue to feed into it and do what we can and be very intentional about what's going to support our actual community.
That's great. I'm kind of curious, though, as you kind of continue on in your path and you're getting, you're about halfway into your first year at LaPorte, what's 1 or 2 things that you want for LaPorte under your leadership?
I think really it's defining where we're going. So really defining what it is that we want to be good at and thrive at, and then emphasizing those things and putting our efforts there to really grow those programs and be able to excel. And so starting from early childhood to career success is I think that's going to kind of be our tagline to emphasize that, we have a program for you no matter what your path is. And it, of course, geared directly with what our community needs to build, kind of a home for all of our students.
I love that, because one of the traps that a lot of superintendents fall in when they go from a smaller to a bigger district is they want to go and say, well, this is how we did it here. The other thing that I think is really important is making sure that you take the time to really understand your stakeholders so that the plan that you're talking about is built from the ground up, not top down.
Yes.
I think schools now would benefit from prioritizing what they want to be great at.
Yes.
Not trying to superficially check off boxes. And unfortunately, sometimes we have a list of items that we have to do, and we focus on checking off boxes because legislation requires it or there are mandates coming down. And I think the more time and energy we can think about as a strategic leader, and we leverage our resources in a way to do that, I think you'll see districts making big gains. And it would tie into what you talked about earlier. If I'm thriving, then I'm also creating a scenario where I now can showcase that.
Yeah.
I think that's
absolutely
a great thing to start with as a new suit.
Yeah. A lot of people talk, in this position nowadays, because we're all competing for students, that we've got to focus our energy on marketing. And we have to put so much, so many of our resources into marketing our district to try to pull kids in from other places. And that is important, but we have to make sure we're really doing good things before we start talking about it, because we can put flashy flyers out there, but if we're not standing behind it and it's all just for show, that's not going to go very far. It's going to, we're basically throwing money out the window at that point. So we have to get really good at what we want to showcase first, and then let that speak for itself.
I love it, because one of the things that I would tell you is if you're not offering the value, then you have no value proposition to market with.
Right.
So other than strategic planning and really thinking about creating your key priority areas, what's one other grand vision that you would like to see happen at LaPorte?
Ultimately, I think culture. It's really a lot about culture and being able to build a culture in the district where people come to LaPorte because it's just a great place to work, and helping to build the atmosphere and the environment where people have trust in the leaders, whether that's their building principal or it's, me in central office or our directors and things like that, just to have trust as like kind of the underlying facet of the entire district. And, that will take time. But yeah.
It's hard to build those value propositions in those great key priority areas without trust.
Absolutely.
I agree. I think you've hit it right on the head when you think about my first year has to be dedicated to building trust and the culture and identifying where we're going to truly be great at. And then from there, I'll have the support of the people to push these initiatives forward.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah.
I always end every episode with, what are you most excited about in the next 12 months professionally?
A lot of what excites me is just really feeling like it's my home, and feeling like I've started to build those relationships. And as I start to see those pieces come together and start feeling the trust building and being able to move forward with a team, that's a big piece for me. And really, the other thing is we have a lot of big initiatives coming up, specifically with career and technical ed. And so there's a lot of exciting opportunities for us in LaPorte where we anticipate some new community partners that we'll be able to announce actually in a couple of months. And so there's some big opportunity for us to, kind of really put some resources into our programs in the area of technology. And so I'm really excited for what we might be able to offer kids within the next 12 months, because I think we have some really exciting things on the horizon.
So what I hear is Sandra Wood's not going anywhere.
I'm not.
LaPorte ready.
I told everyone when I came in, I've got my youngest, I'll have 15 years before he will walk across the stage to get his diploma. So my goal would be to hand it to him. So
that's an amazing opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.